Set 1 claims pediatricians are rich. Set 2 claims pediatricians are doctors. We verify these differently. Set 1 is synthetic. Its truth depends on external facts. You must check their bank accounts. Set 2 is analytic, verified automatically simply by knowing the word's definitions. If you deny a synthetic fact, you are just mistaken. But if you claim some pediatricians aren't doctors, your sentence is unintelligible. It is a contradiction in terms. This division structures the framework of traditional epistemology. It separates the scientist observing the physical world from the philosopher analyzing concepts from the armchair. In the 20th century, the foundations of mathematics reached extreme complexity. Thinkers feared math might be an unreliable empirical science, subject to messy real-world observations. To rescue mathematics, thinkers developed logicism. Logicism is the project aiming to prove that all arithmetic is actually a complex network of pure logic. The appeal is categorical certainty. If math is purely logical, it is analytic, meaning it can be known a priori, justified independently of physical experience. Figures like Bertrand Russell and Gottlob Frege spent years trying to build this rigorous logical architecture. The foundation of necessary truth in mathematics and philosophy rested on a single goal, proving we can define exactly what makes a statement analytic. Earlier philosophers, like Immanuel Kant, tried to define analyticity by saying one concept was contained within another. That is a psychological metaphor. It wasn't mathematically rigorous enough for what these logicians needed. Frege solved this by defining a formal logical truth as a sentence that remains true no matter what non-logical variables you insert. Take the sentence, "All doctors that specialize on children are doctors." We strip away the messy real-world nouns to reveal the underlying structure. All F that G are F. It remains logically true no matter what words you use. Now apply this exact same abstraction test to our classic candidate. All pediatricians are doctors. The engine abstracts it to all X are Y. It fails the formal test. We can prove why it fails by inserting new variables. If X is cats and Y is mice, the sentence becomes all cats are mice. That is demonstrably false. Formal logic alone cannot prove that a seemingly obvious sentence like all pediatricians are doctors is universally true. It requires a linguistic patch to balance the equation. Frege provided that patch. He argued that non-logical analytic truths can be converted into formal logical truths simply by substituting synonyms for synonyms. This diagram shows the substitution in action. A dictionary module swaps the term pediatricians for its synonym definition, doctors that specialize on children. This conversion allows the natural language to match the formal logic. The equation balances, and the truth is preserved. There is a major unstated assumption running this engine. It relies on the belief that synonymy, exact sameness of meaning, is a solid, scientifically measurable property of language. The defense of a priori knowledge and mathematical certainty hinges on whether philosophers can prove two words mean the same thing without looking at the outside world. In 1951, the philosopher W.V.O. Quine published a critique that challenged the core of the system. He demanded a rigorous, non-empirical definition of synonymy itself. You might defend the system by saying synonyms are simply words that are interchangeable in any sentence without changing its truth value. Quine pointed out that interchangeability only proves synonymy if it works in sentences about necessity. For example, necessarily all bachelors are unmarried males. But how do we know a statement is a necessary truth? The only way to know that is if the statement is already analytic. Quine exposed the logical trap. These concepts are mutually definable but scientifically empty. They form a closed curve in space that never touches actual reality. If analyticity cannot be defined without circularity, the rigid boundary between truths of meaning and truths of fact dissolves, dismantling the armchair philosopher sanctuary. We are left with a question. If there are no purely analytic truths that we can know independent of experience, how do we verify any scientific or mathematical belief? Quine offered an alternative model called confirmation holism. This is the idea that individual statements do not face the tribunal of experience alone, but only as a corporate, unified body. He grounded this idea in Pierre Duhem's practical observation about how scientists conduct physical experiments. This is a vintage thermometer. Taking a simple reading requires a complex array of physical mechanisms to function correctly. This network topology represents the web of belief. If that thermometer gives an unexpected reading, we aren't solely testing the ambient heat. We simultaneously test the glass, the calibration, and background laws of physics. To fix the anomaly, scientists have a choice: discard a peripheral node, assuming the thermometer broke, or revise a deep central node, changing the laws of thermodynamics. Because any isolated claim can be saved by adjusting the background network, testing one empirical fact is actually a test of our entire worldview. This leads to a radical implication. If everything is connected to empirical data, no statement is immune to revision, not even formal logic or pure math. Historically, math seemed immune to revision because it occupies the load-bearing center of the web. It remains stable because every other belief depends on it, meaning the category of analytic truth is a label for a position in the network, not a separate kind of reality. We have historical evidence of this. Look at how Albert Einstein changed the definitions of a straight line or kinetic energy in the 20th century. Einstein didn't discover new empirical planets. He forced a revision of the mathematical geometry of spacetime, simply to make our overall web of physics more elegant. Mathematics and logic are not laws handed down from outside the universe. They are simply the most deeply entrenched, pragmatic pillars of our empirical theories. So how do we resolve the opening paradox? If analyticity is a myth, why does denying a statement like "bachelors are unmarried" feel so logically impossible? That feeling is an illusion created by centrality. The belief is so trivial and so deeply embedded in our linguistic conventions that we never encounter empirical pressure strong enough to force us to revise it. This network model represents Quine's verdict on the architecture of human thought. He rejected the binary of fact and definition entirely. He concluded that human knowledge is a pale gray lore, black with fact and white with convention, but with no purely black or white threads to be found. To understand meaning, philosophy must abandon the armchair dictionary and study the causal physics of the world, or the empirical mechanics of the human brain. The death of the analytic-synthetic distinction shows us that human thought, down to its most basic definitions, is inseparable from the physical universe.